My name is Aleksander Momot. Hello everyone. I have been in the crypto sphere since 2013. The first thing I did after buying bitcoins is that we did the service to pay for the mobile phone in bitcoins. In the 2014, the bank successfully closed our account in a few months as soon as I came to them and asked, can we still accept payments in the other direction? Therefore, our first business indeed in a few months. Then I did money for a couple of years. They sold equipment built on chips, fewer equipment bits, including those with liquid cooling, and here in the 15th years, they began to make RAM. RAM is a passwordless access system, you can call it differently, but what we have identified as most promising vector in the use for access management is getting access to your account as a decentralized PK infrastructure system. Everything is much more complicated here because there is an exciting infrastructure that needs to be changed. Therefore, we'll tell more. And a very good use case for Internet of Things, the ability to give each device access to the system so that it cannot be changed without using simple password and so on. Raise your hand who ever heard anything about us before. Well, that's a lot. Then I will somehow miss the simplest things, and usually I will start with the simplest. Raise your hand who ever forgot the password. Some did not forget. Good. Those did not forget, did not raise this hand. Do you use one of these passwords? The problem with modern security is that even if you use a password that is not as simple as this one, people are still, because of the complexity of all the necessary, actions aimed at protecting your account, they do not. Everyone prefers the simplest. The simplest is a password 123456, no two factors. And they simply drove on, run the money into the account, and then they wrote to us, oh, RAM tokens has stolen from us, please do something. The problem is that all modern security rests on the human factor. When people try to do something very safe, usually 100 and 500 or thumb complexions arise. For example, try explaining to our parents, grandparents, how to use private keys in order to secure the cryptosphere. I think that we'll have difficulties with this. And when I thought about our decision, in general, the idea arose from the fact that I forgot the password to the ISO wallet on the Ether. I thought for a long time how to restore it. As a result, I found a description on the forums that send us all your usual passwords that you use, and we will write out them and then send you the Ether. Well, you see this. This is a little risky action. I thought that, so I myself can do this. I found the requirements for a password that were still in some post by Vitalik some years ago for the 214. He had all the characters there, and so hacking himself for several days trying to think of password. Well, okay, if it's logical in the case of broadcasting, and since people constantly forget the password, that's a huge problem, and the technology has remained the same. And my thought was after that, damn well, are we really doing Ether there? Well, there Vitalik makes the Ether so that the ships sail from one sea to another, paid without using a bank, without lawyers, automatically transactions, therefore the delivery of goods, and I still use passwords, and nothing can be done about it. So we came to the idea of RAM, and when we began to study in general what's going on in the market, we learned that it turns out there are very large losses from cyber attacks. It's not directly related to our user part. This is due to the fact that we are all users of banks. For example, the bank may have a break-in, and it has happened like this, and our banks and Western banks do it regularly, but no one usually knows how much it costs. Many banks are silent. Those who are not silent when information comes out, they have a figure of $6 trillion by the year 2021, which will account for the total losses from such cyber attacks. 1.5 million is the average cost of loss from a single attack. Why do I tell you the loss is? In addition to what you probably know what a civic is, who knows what a civic is? Good, I'm very blessed. And turns out I know much more than civic in Ukraine. Well, in general, there are many companies that build distributed identity. There is a large list of them. Civic one time was the most famous. The problem with Civic is that somewhere in 2016 we started to pass inspiration our idea to the incubator there, including Butcherian and so on. The first question we were asked were how you different from LastPass. We explained that this is not related to LastPass at all, and then when people realized that in principle the idea is similar to identity, and then later Civic did later turn out that people are not ready to pay for it. Uport, Sovereign, and many more projects there, Showcard and so on, imply that a person can somewhere, for example, to the site, creates an account there, adding there some data, and then they will transfer this data to a specific service in a safe, decentralized way. This works only for one company in the world, or more precisely for one protocol. AUS 0. No, 0 AUS. Or auth. Probably remember when you go somewhere to comment on the website, you offer to somehow log in the commenting system. It's just convenient in ORNet. There are 70% of people use such a commenting system because they don't need to create a new account. People do not want to do extra movement at all, something extra to create. So they click login with Facebook and that's it. But on the other hand, login with Facebook doesn't work in the bank. This is not enough for the bank. The bank does not want to rely on Facebook as a data provider. He wants to give this layer of identity himself and to ensure the security of the access management itself. If you say in Russian, then he wants to create the initial data layer himself and then there be the data he needs and give access to the account using a protected technology that is also controlled by him. As a result, we came up this. Raise your hand who knows CCL-TLS certificate. What is it? Who does not know? Such a green little lock in the upper left corner of the browser, which provides a certification of the certificate at the site. So you're sure that this is not a phishing site. This is an old technology. It has long been used. They thought up to take it, release it on the blockchain, so that the private key will always remain with you. In this case now, when we use the password, it turns out that the password is our private key which we freely give to all, send it to internet, and if there is the slightest kind of phishing along the way, keylogin, you need to pick up the password. It's simple and so on. You lose the password. Accordingly, you lose access to your account. In this case, you can sign the certificate. Your private key will remain on your computer, and your public key will live in the form of a certificate. A certificate is, roughly speaking, such a proxy for a public key or invalid there. Here you show everyone your name. My name is like that. If someone tries to use your name, he will not be able to do it, because the private key remains with you, your signature remains with you, but it's safe to transfer to everyone. And if you use this as your ID, you can log into some services. You can also use two-factor. Two-factor can be any. If this is a Google Authenticator, by the way, raise a hand who has accounts on crypto exchanges. Good. Raise your hand who has two-factor included. Well, in principle, almost everyone. The standard of two-factor on crypto exchanges is now Google 2FA standard, Google Authenticator. The standard 2FA in the corporate field is the utility devices, for example, a disposable flash drive. Here in the IBM, I don't know how it now. Some time ago it was necessary. Google just recently added 1 year ago, and this year they did not have any hacks. Here it is considered the maximum level of security. This is usually determined by the internal policy of the company. There is a very strict standard. And the fact that we will not use, because, well, firstly we need a fan to have these devices for each side. There will be different technologies everywhere. The average user prefers not to bother like that. In the case of Google, there it is impossible not to bother because it's company policy. Accordingly, the conditional company that will represent the power company. We recently had cyber attacks 2 years ago on Ukrainian companies. It can integrate this solution. SLTLS is usually understood by many applications that are inside the system, and make there a two-factor that corresponds to the policy of the organization. After that, this website Just now still need to run a little ahead. Currently, conventional browsers, in order to check these types of certificates, they work according to an algorithm. They check it in three systems. The first is the certification authority, the centralized organization that issued the certificate, for example, Global Sign and so on. Number two, they should check these in the Microsoft storage, Active Directory and so on. And number three, it needs to be checked in a special Google tool, which some time ago we realized that everything is very bad with certificates. It is the same outdated technology as passwords, and therefore just in case they also wanted to check that everything is okay with them. Because of all these difficulties with certificates, because of technology flaws, again, running a little ahead. Now, the main money in the market is not earned by company that issue a certificate, as it turns out, but the companies that provide services for accessing the status of a certificate they need for its release and so on. The contract for an average company with Global Sign can be $20,000 or $50,000. Then the contract of this company with another company that provides certification of Global Sign certificates will be $200,000 or $500,000. What, as you understand, suggests that the market is a little inefficient and the underlying technology is not normal. Then can be compared with the fact that if you bought a car then and the technology of tires remained 100 years ago and your tire makes its way every 500 meters and therefore there are about 100 on the roads everyone in the world, and every 50 meters you have to stop and they glue this wheel to with some kind of chewing gum so that another 50 meters can be passed. It's very strange and wrong, but it happens in the world. Unfortunately, it works like this. Until now, everyone is using these outdated, let's say, technologies, and we have figured out how to improve this and how to make this infrastructure supporting all of this. This will have to. If we are talking about a regular web service, there are nothing complicated here. The conditional exchange integrates a small part on its side. There are a few lines of code that use the library to go to the blockchain to check the status of the certificate, then send to UFA. Everything is okay. You get access. For you as a user, this is 2 clicks. OK and big button OK. Instead of the usual login fields, the password is one button OK. And for example, a bot come to your Telegram, also OK. Two-factor. Everything is very simple. From the server side, it will go to the blockchain. But if you're talking about a big company, the level of bank there, it has 100 and 500 layers inside that all its system must go through. They make sure everything is okay, everything is correct, and so on. And it's difficult to do. Usually, all these layers are not that they have no idea what a blockchain is. They have never came across the systems in any way over the past 20 years. It all works there as it was invented in the 90s. And in order to adapt it, we will make a custom assembly of Chromium, which will understand to where to go. For example, inside the company, as they work with UTF politions for the second factor, they will say, guys, you need to install another Chrome browser. As you know, Chromium is an assembly based on Chrome core, so the administrator will install all Chromium and then it will work correctly in a way. This is just in more detail we are discussing what is the difference between the old certification authority and the new system, when certificates will be issued by the nodes, and already then approaching the economy token, the certificate is not issued centrally, as is happening now, but by the node system. Each node working according to consensus, it risks stick when issuing a certificate, the cost of the node increases with time, those the increasing cost of an attack on the network and the increasingly high security with the network uptime is provided. Now about small distractions about how early in the cryptosphere, let's say, it was the idea to provide such a system that would be in demand by the enterprise and how it failed. Now, no one will argue probably that the most successful ecosystem in our cryptosphere is the Ether. Raise a hand who disagree. Good. That's it. The Ether after the Bitcoins, since we understand that the Bitcoin is not an ecosystem, There's such a foundation on which everything else works. And the other has occupied a line of some application with certain use. First of all, naturally, this is seen in the example I saw, all the rest. Well, there are some markets for, 90 probably belongs to the Ether, despite the billions of dollars that we have spent then on the Chinese blockchains, waves and so on. Still, Ether number one, but... So I remembered where very well then in the 14 years when they advertised there was marketing in the Ether. Of course, everything was different from what it is now, but also the words, let's say as a result, diverged from the case not for the reason for that some kind of malicious intent, but because the enterprise blockchain of the system perceived very badly. The ships did not float without lawyers and without banks, so that they would be paid by crypto under a smart contract. Why? Because it's reason number one. Imagine, yes, you have electricity there. Well, the house is so. Nuclear reactor cooling system, and you stopped a nuclear reactor because the electricity is not rich and the smart contract payment did not pass. And there, as it were, launched a new game. No. So, the point is not in blockchain bandits as such, and the fact that the seals put the crypto, but just at this moment was pre-sale. I have particularly warm feelings for this, but it does not matter. The fact is that no one is responsible for what happens on the Ethereum blockchain. And there is a very big problem between censorship resistance and possibility in the face of enterprise. Enterprise words censorship resistance don't understand. They want a signature to be in the contract so that it's at worst insured, and at best there is a liability there, and so on. There is no such thing in blockchain. Economically, we have two options: or wait until the enterprise comes to our point of view and will perceive it as a norm, which is unlikely to happen in the foreseeable future, or invent some bridges. Here, we have such a person in the Ukrainian community, Sergei Kalinin. He brought a cool post about the enterprise operations of the current blockchain projects. So I'll tell you briefly. 90% of all corporate projects that experiment with the crypto will be stopped. Usually it does not go beyond the project of proof of concept. The technology is very complex for current businesses. Microsoft and IBM hold a significant part of the market. Only 1% of IT directors have implemented something. Any percent are not going to do it, and thus announced projects that will put it off. I was at a conference in November of the 17th year together with the leaders of NATO, European Union. There are still many large companies there, there are very large banks there. I was very surprised when I asked, who heard about the blockchain? It was somewhere there. 8 months ago. In principle, most people knew about the blockchain for a long time. They looked at it, realized that it didn't work at the form and stopped looking at it. When people usually say that now the whole corporate world is switching the blockchain there, then this is most likely not true, because in its current form, the blockchain is not suitable for them. What bridges should we do to make it different? So a few points that are very important. First, throughput of blockchain. Clearly, because of the cryptokitties and because of the rest. Opportunities for some extra features. It is usually a highly specialized solution that can only do this and nothing else. Risk management. They need to understand who is responsible for this. Reliability blockchain. They need to understand that this is a derivative, probably from bandits and from the correct solution architecture, that everything is working correctly. And the fifth, last but not least, prices. 2 years ago I came to people in order to get feedback. I don't remember what kind of company it was, no matter. They would ask the same thing. How much does it cost? I say, well, you know, in Bitcoin there is a commission, then we have a solution on Bitcoin. Bitcoin, it is a dynamic commission. It will depend on how much the power hash is at the time, the block size. And while I explained this, I understood that everything turned off at the person. He didn't understand at all. He asked how much it would cost, but I cannot answer the question. And this form does not work. Again, 3 basic principles. What I said at the beginning, if we are talking about a security solution, there is either simplicity or security, or it is suitable for business. Usually the figure of this triangle is very much elongated in one direction. Either it is very secure, as it is the case with some hardware tokens, but are non-use, if we are talking about some external users. And internal users just loot them. There are some difficulties with this. Or it's not very simple. If it's simple, then it's unsafe. And the last thing is convenience for business. It usually does not allow the utilitarian solution, which was built according to the classic canons of ordinary startups, to make the solution somehow flexible and adapted to each unique case. And here we are. Now here I continue about nodes. Who followed all our such tokens sale? Raise your hand, please. A couple of people. Good. One of the most important factors that help us, we collect 20 million in 24 hours. I don't know how much, and the fastest or not in Eastern Europe, but it was fast enough for us in principle. It also came as a surprise at some point, and we analyzed the reasons why the project became so interesting. One of the reasons was that we had nodes. What give us the nodes? In fact, the entire issue of certificates is done through the node system, not through us as a centralized authority. In order to properly start this process, you need to properly distribute the node, so that we do not get a conditional bitman in our network or someone else who will control having a lot of money or some kind of advantage at the start. The ability to carry out an attack of 51%. Such situations constantly occurred in the Bitcoin. If you know, in the 14th year, 51% could be carried out by one person from the shed under Kyiv. At the moment, this can be done by the main bitmain. And at different times, it happens that with the help of pools, people in need and thus earn money. It is clear that in the case of Bitcoin, no one is interested in carrying out this attack. But in the case of our system, since its scale will be smaller, at least at first, we understand that a conditional attacker, if this is about some serious groups, it can gain a very large stake. There are hundreds for him $1 million may not be a problem and attack the network by buying nodes. To prevent this from happening, we decided to do this as follows. The nodes will be distributed in several stages. At the first stage, 100 nodes will be distributed to unique addresses. It doesn't matter if people find out about this and start splitting their stakes, since our distribution is based on holding, so the person does not sell tokens from the time of token of sale. Then trying to manipulate tokens there somehow will not work at different addresses. After the first stage is completed, on the second one, you can already receive several nodes within one common coil, one address. At the moment you have about 200 people there, claim on stage and several hundred people still apply for the second stage. The most important demand will come from people who have a very big stake at one address. For example, our largest investor has already accumulated order there, according to current figures, despite the fact that the price after the token has dropped more than $1 million. So again, since the price of node in the tokens is fixed, it is 200,000 tokens, it can buy a lot of nodes, but we cannot allow this situation, so we made this system which will ensure, first of all, fair distribution. It will not be like in a proof of stake when an attack with money is possible, and secondly, the third stage will allow us to constantly increase the cost of the attack. If at the moment a node is worth 215,000 tokens, then after the first 2.5 nodes are distributed, each next node will be more and more expensive. This is a very preliminary version. We have not decided how it will be, but one of the options discussed is, for example, the number of people declaring that they want to get a node. Each check is 1%. For example, empty, as the primary nodes are distributed, the following nodes showed up 50 people, so the price increases by 50%. The next node will always cost more. If there are no people willing, and for example something happened with the course, it has somehow changed, and there is no longer many interest in buying a node, the network continues to work in 251 nodes. This does not affect performance, but in order to carry out an attack on the network and by a large number of nodes and try to issue fake certificates, this will be impossible. Because firstly, there is a period, for example, every 2 weeks or every month there will be the next auction and the cost will increase. A person who wants to buy a lot of nodes, he will not be able to do it. There is another question, how to buy old nodes from the network that you have now. It will also be difficult to do because the nodes will have a very complex motivation system based on reputation and stake. In order to give people who have a big stake the opportunity to earn more and the opportunity to defrost their stake more quickly, we need to discuss how we decided to do this. So, as you understand, the nodes will be rewarded for issuing a certificate. We present the reward in the form of 100%. 10% of this goes to RAM. As business models, as maintaining network activity, we differ from typical protocols because we don't say that we are simply a foundation which deals with this one and non-commercial basis. This is also not a very clear enterprise. We determined for ourselves that since we collected a hard cap, we had a gradation. With a hard cap, we keep 10% of ourselves, it's less. There are 20 or 30. We collected the hard cap, respectively, we keep only 10% and 45% and 45% goes to the node. By the first 45% is available immediately, the second 45% is frozen on the node for a certain period of time. The defrosting speed will depend on the reputation and on the extra stake. Ideally, the node has the highest possible stake at the highest possible reputation, then the whole amount is available immediately. Accordingly, in this way, we associate a certain number of tokens, increase the cost of the node for its owner, and reduce the opportunity for someone to come and offer to resell the node without loss. The whole network is protected in this way. A few words about the cost. As you understand, we have it fixed in dollars, but we need to leave the possibility of volatile token price. So the content in one token certificate will be different. It will depend on the price that is now on the market. And about the mechanics of the token, we still have it in our work. As far as the reward of the nodes is concerned, well, at least I can tell you something at the moment. It's possible to make a bet depending on the reputation for receiving the reward. For example, you are the owner of the node, you bet $1 in addition to the stake that you have, and someone bets $10. If his reputation is also high, then he will receive most of the reward. Accordingly, it's a bit like gamification. This also gives protection to the network, and we try to make it so that the reputation and the stake was a much greater incentive. As you know, the biggest problem in the proof of stake is the ability of someone to grab money. The network, so we put the combination of useful work that was released in the first place. Reputation depends on it. The more certificates were issued in the past, the longer a node was online and so on, the more it can receive as reward. And this rate technique allows disciplined node. Since if it risks its money, it has a much greater incentive to be online. Accordingly, if someone decides to fail this network, every node owner as it risks a stake will be interested in applying the maximum amount of protection against such DDoS and not losing its stake. Because if he voted bad, then went online, then the bet is lost in favor of those who were online. In general, this is all quite difficult. We will try to make a beautiful, clear document layout so that everyone can beat. Because we still do not fully understand, but we are trying to draw models in which all this will be described very nicely. With the node, we plan to at least announce about this distribution sometime in August, probably, and sometime in the fall, to hold the process of distributing the nodes. While we are working on the consensus, here we have a couple of figures that, in principle, a lot of enterprise companies have already announced themselves to pilot program. I noticed that they are always just in case declared and then find out whether it suits them or not. But in fact, indeed, there is outdated figure, well, it is not even there about hunting and help companies by the numbers of their users. There are a lot of them, more than half a billion users they all have because of this. We even specially set up how we do a random pricing policy, because when this is a gaming platform on WeChat from China, they cannot pay $1 for each user. They are willing to pay 1 cent there. And when these are a company of the critical infrastructure of the United States, which provides healthy states with electricity and water, they're willing to pay as much as they want, if only it's more reliable and so on. We need a differentiation in prices. Economically, we came up with several options for how to make the nodes on the one hand do the same work, but the cost was different for the end customer. These are those customers and partners with whom we have discussed. As you know, we are building on Hyperledger, therefore Linux Foundation and Hyperledger are our partners. The technology allows customization of consensus. This is the most important advantage. For those who plan to develop something on their own, we can recommend it, since in principle they actively go to contact, support and so on. Also, there is now our first pilot program, which is successfully integrated in principle. This made a euro, the main model that allows you to identify the device between the equipment in the energy sector and determine which source sends the data. Since there are maybe many installations, imagine this is something like a smart city sensor, a lot of sensors. It's necessary to clearly understand which of them send it, but at the same time things that are done. For example, new cipher, how to say it, end-to-end encryption is meaningless and it only interferes. So, you don't need to encrypt the data that is inside, you just need to understand that the source of the equipment is correct. These can be applied in any area where you need to make sure that the sender is correct. It's already on GitHub, you can see who's interested to collect, it's already working. In principle, there is our team, it's here almost at full present. Thanks, ready to answer questions, if there are any. Thank you very much, Alexander. Yes, we do have time for questions, raise your hands. Only one thing, wait for the microphones. I wanted to ask, but does the rating go according to the principle of technical parameters or in more detail? First stake. The more stake, the more chance. Secondly, there is the previous reputation. How many have already been released, how many nodes have been online, and so on. And thirdly, there was something else. Well, you will guess that there will be randomness later. It will be displayed in the social rating when you consider the randomness of users who will use in the future. This is either the Chinese for 1 cent or is the Americans next. No, it will not be connected. That's it. Randomness is most likely not. With so many factors, I think there will be almost a clear certainty which node will take which position in the ranking for receiving the award. Because too many factors affect this. Randomness would be in the version in which we initially thought it would work. They just all nodes, and now if they're online they take part. But this is not entirely correct. This gives no incentive to stay online. This gives them no incentive to defend themselves DDoS like that, and for all possible attacks there. It is a less reliable system than this one is rating. Yep, here is how you now have an account on the exchange. Here is Bittrex. Bittrex really annoys me because they check IP all the time, and IP is all dynamic all the time. So need to do this. Logic password coming in Binance is a lot better because, let's say, they're more innovative in their approach to the question. You come in instead of the logic password to just have a certificate. Now you need to enter the login password, then two-factor, then confirm your IP, and then repeat the process. In the case of Bittrex, this. In the case of any exchange in your browser. This is the same certificate as any other. If you open the repository now, you have a list of such large certificates. This is the same certificate. It's different in that it's self-signed. There's no signature global sign or digital certificate or something else. There will be a RAM signature. In the sense of the ordinary world, this is a self-signed certificate, but it's validated by the blockchain. How will I come from the desktop version or the mobile version of the browser? You can issue child certificates for any of your devices. You will have 10 of them there, for example. Never mind, you come in exactly the same way from any other browser, but there is a certificate, you are asked to see a two-factor is still desirable, because in any case, even certificates are stored in a relatively secure browser storage can theoretically be stolen, therefore two-factor is still desirable. You use any two-factor, some Google Authenticator if you want, Telegram. The bot in Telegram will come, okay, as it's now in private or Google, here's a new system, any hard token there, the exchange allows you it, or the system in which you log in. For the exchange, I think, since it's a simple smart system, there will be something like a Telegram and a Google Authenticator. Another question? Alexander, I understand correctly. If at the loss of certificates, well, it was like this: reinstall Windows, here on the money used. There were such moments when Windows reinstalled and the certificate was lost, and there's necessary to enter through the login through the password. Well, look, the possibility remains again, login and password, if you did not forget to use this again. You see, if you return to the login and password, then there is no point in this, because again the password was intercepted. We can talk about how to restore the certificate, how to revoke certificate that lies on the blockchain. There are three options. It can be integrated in different ways. The first option is private keys. People who understand technology very well understand that they do everything through a private key. Write it down somewhere, split it up and so on. Since the phrase is important, similar this time, but we understand that, in my opinion, Kraken, only 3% of accounts are protected by a two-factor. All of all the active little more. None will do that. Therefore, only for people who are very well versed. Second option, more simple format students, link to some less reliable mobile phone, email address, but another factor through which you can recover. And the third option is how it happens now, if you lose everything from the exchange. So I woke up once in the morning and my phone rang, Google Authenticator, and I do not have access to the exchange. There was a special code to restore Google Authenticator. It turned out that I did not record it for two exchanges. I read them, please restore your account. They ask some clarifying questions. If everything matches, they manually restore access to you. That's exactly the same, it will work. There is no difference. The recovery mechanism will be the same as it's now. But all the attacks that are being carried out now there is massive hacking of wallets, via VPN, through the browser retention, through someone's there. If early, it's usually. What percentage of audience? We can ask. I have Linux, I have raised. Please raise your hand. Many percent? 5 or 10. I mean, through the range. I don't know the details of how they are satisfied. Just the problem that they steal everything is in open form. Private keys and your passwords are in a clear view. If you get rid of it, 76% of all cyber attacks are now aimed at stealing personal user data. If you remove these 76%, then the probability of an attack on these percentages is reduced. Then there are more complex attacks that require either the presence of some things on some computers that are already more complex, but again, keylogin will not work, brute force, man in the middle, and all the other attacks no longer work. Only to provide protection is enough to find the most vulnerable places, and accordingly the general security of the system will increase, and then it will depend on you. How secure are they using your recovery email address? Now, the whole architecture is tied up, even if the password, for example, is secure, even if it's stored correctly on the server, there are very no leaks, it's encrypted, or just salt, and so on. You can still steal it on the way. Even if you have everything okay, then you have some kind of mechanism. This email address to which you need to send, there's also some kind of password, or maybe it was created then 20 years ago and then 5 letters. It is easy to guess, and so on. You're talking about my Ether wallet on the blockchain, Ether, or you have it on the blockchain? We wrote our blockchain, there's nothing on the Ether. Good. The next question. What platform would you recommend for using coins inside games? Which platform would you recommend? Do you want to attract money or to work? To work. Well, if you want to work, then I think it's better to build a custom hyperledger on the same one and make zero transaction costs. But the fact is that again encryption plays a big role. We specifically made the transaction fee. You have free blockchain reading. It's like on Explorer blockchain. You want to read the IP protocol for you to play for sure. It's also important that. And in order to exchange literally the coin, make an ERC20 token, the atomic swap. See, ERC20 token that you sell. So we did the same. The problem is really in the listing, but it's still there. If such reduction continues, the exchanges will list all of them. Well, for now, let's say there is this problem. Choose the best ERC20 token and make a separate parallel blockchain on which zero transactions inside the network will be utilitarian. There is some security issue. Well, Wave generally has a centralized server that makes this swap centralized, but no one bricks it, because it doesn't need it. But if you really want to take it all very seriously, do it through an atomic swap like us. We do this with a large margin. We have it almost there already. The cost significantly go up in value. Well, slightly. Let's just say, so listing, there is a Russian project. They are suing his BTC there because they have not flooded their open ledger token. If they had an ERC20 token, then they would not have lost theirs. I don't know, then they would not have lost others. I don't remember how many, 200 and half or 500 others. The ERC20 token is an industry standard, and so you will quickly get stuck. I advise you to make an external token payment to do ERC20 and assign to do everything on a custom blockchain with zero transactions. And after some time, if you are worth billions, then without any problems you will make a swap into a mainnet and fill your main token and remove if there is such need again. Because it's also change your architecture. You have 1 million holders, all have their own wallets. It needs to be deployed. Those who recently opened their EOS wallets, I think, understand what problems this may be connected with. This is an extra action. They are not always needed. Thank you so much. We will now have a 10-minute break. I think the whole RAN team is here. You can ask them questions, right? Thank you very much for the detailed answers to the questions, for the super clear report. Let's applaud Alexander again.